Oh, baby, the dust has settled on Richard Bleier and Matt Barnes trade. I, yesterday, covered everything, my initial reactions on that trade. However, what I felt was missing was the scouting report. A scouting report from a Red Sox fan. So that's what we're going to make happen. And it's not just any Red Sox fan. It's a UK Red Sox fan. Yes, sir. Locked on Marlins, of course, going UK vibes. Digging into the Richard Bleier, Matt Barnes trade. Also, we're going to have some Jazz Chisholm talk. And also some trades that could have happened, maybe can still happen between the Marlins and Red Sox. All on today's Locked On Marlins.
You are Locked On Marlins, your daily podcast on the Miami Marlins. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings from England and welcome to Locked On Marlins. This is your daily Marlins podcast. I, of course, am your host, Peter Pratt. Hit me up on Twitter, at Twitter only. No Instas, no TikToks. I am too old. Twitter at Miami Marlins _UK. If you are listening to the pod, hit subscribe, leave a review. Why not? And yes, the other thing here, there is also a YouTube channel. Yes, sir. And it is perfectly named. The channel is named Locked On Marlins. Do you see what we did there? Head over there if you'd like to see the action. It's the same audio via pod, but you get to see the action. And if you are watching, you will see one of the UK GOATs, UK Godfathers is how I would describe it, actually. John McGee is on the show. John, how we doing, brother?
I'm good, mate. It's nice for me to be on the other side of the microphone, being asked the questions rather than asking them. I'm in my normal role on Backflips and Nerds. I'm the man who has to herd the cats. So I'm very happy to be the cat that's been herded today.
Absolutely. Well, it's great to have you along, mate. This is your debut appearance on Locked On Marlins, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, I know you've had all of the rest of them. I've been waiting for the call for a couple of years now, mate. But finally here and happy to be so.
Absolutely. So for those listening and thinking Backflips and Nerds, not sure about those guys. Let me just give you a bit of backstory on Backflips, because these are the godfathers, I would describe it, of UK baseball coverage. And it was the first podcast I ever went on. John McGee hosting, herding cats back then, talking about the NL East. And that was what inspired me to get into podcasting. Absolutely immense podcast, immense writing, Backflips and Nerds. It is the UK GOAT of content, in my opinion. And John McGee, big part of that, mate. So kudos to you. How many years have you been rolling with Backflips, by the way?
I think this is year six. Yeah. So it's still going. That's the main thing.
The grind is real.
The grind is real. Yeah, and trying to keep up with baseball over the course of the last 3 months has been it's been quite something. It's been there's been a lot, hasn't there? We've done our AL winter recap, and it almost ran for like 2.5 hours. We haven't even got round to the NL yet. We would be spending 45 minutes on the Marlins, mate. So you've got that to come.
Oh, 100%. Okay, so here's the other wrinkle here. John is a Red Sox fan, and so after yesterday's blockbuster deal that went down, a reliever for reliever trade, and frankly, the lack of knowledge.
Pulse raising, mate.
The pulse was raising, baby. Absolutely. These are season-defining moves, is how I would describe it. And frankly, I had limited knowledge. I've had limited eyeballs on Matt Barnes. So I thought it was right to get a Red Sox fan to give it the full scan report. But reminder, this episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. It's the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. You can visit fanduel.com/lockedon today to get started. And John, let's get ourselves started here, mate. Let's start with the return for the Red Sox. I covered Richie Bleier from a Marlins perspective. He is also known as Big Dick Bleier in Marlins universe too. So I'll put that out there and let you take that one.
Yep.
A lefty to the pen for the Red Sox. Initial reaction to the acquisition of Bleier in this trade?
I think it's a good move for the Red Sox. So their bullpen last year was a mess. We'll get on to that in due course, of course, talking about Matt Barnes. He
Uh-oh.
wasn't the only mess, but we'll get onto that. The
Okay.
bullpen last year was atrocious. It's a big part of why the Red Sox had the record that they did last year. Pitching overall was awful, but the bullpen was particularly bad. They've rebuilt it this offseason. They've brought in Chris Martin and Kenley Jansen, Joely Rodriguez. But they were short of lefties. Darwinson Hernandez was DFA'd earlier in the offseason to make way for, I think it was Justin Turner. And Josh Taylor moved to Kansas in the Adalberto Mondesi trade. So they were short of a lefty. They don't have any lefties in the system. And they're going to be a defense first team, right? You look at that infield now, even without Story, you bring Mondesi in to replace him, Christian Arroyo, Cossis, and Devers, who I think is a good defender, despite what everyone else thinks. They're going to be a nickel and dime team. They don't have the big sluggers that they've had. So a guy who keeps the ball on the ground, like Bleier, pitches to contact, good fit. They needed another lefty. He's a serviceable one. It was the last thing that I think most fans were expecting of them. And to get it done in a trade for Matt Barnes was unusual. But I think Red Sox Nation seems pretty pleased with that return.
I would agree. When you start to kind of field opinions, right, on Twitter, and that's the way, it's the go-to place for opinions in many ways. And the sense I had was, from a Marlins perspective, everyone was like, seems like a great deal. Then I start to dig into my Red Sox follows, and they were saying the same thing. They were absolutely over the moon. Because I guess when we strip this away, this is what kind of makes things unique here. Matt Barnes was DFA'd. It wasn't like he was, on the roster and it was expected to be. The guy was DFA'd. And to get anything back of major league value that could be used in the season ahead, I mean, that feels like a huge W for the Red Sox, I would say. And I mean, okay, they've had to send some money to make it happen, to offset the money situation. In effect, it becomes a 1-for-1 swap. They offset the dough. Bleier plus, I guess it's $5 million coming back to the Marlins. So, it is an unusual trade, but like I said, getting something back at all for Barnes is a W, right?
Yeah, definitely. And when Barnes was DFA'd, I think there was initial surprise, and then everyone sort of had a conversation with themselves and understood why it happened, because his performance over the last 18 months has been pretty poor, and his contract is pretty big. We're eating a lot of it, which makes it work for you. It's just also unusual to see a trade for a proper trade for a DFA'd player that isn't like cash or some kid from the DSL, right? That's what you're used to seeing. So a very, very unusual trade just in its makeup, but it does seem to work for both parties, as far as I can tell. Like you guys are looking for high upside relievers, which Bleier is a decent pitcher, but he is what he is now, right? He's 35 years old. If you think you can fix Barnes, why not take a flyer on that when the Red Sox are willing to eat some money? I saw Chris Cotillo, who writes for Mass Live, so he's one of the Red Sox beat reporters, saying yesterday that what he felt this trade shows was that at least some of the rest of baseball value Barnes quite differently from the Red Sox, which, it makes total sense.
Yeah, it does. The question comes, and then the follow-on question, but there's going to be an ad, but the question I'm going to ask you is why he was DFA'd. So I guess that's the story that we'll segue into, and it's one that I'm looking forward to you telling, to be honest. So stay tuned for that one, guys. But as I've already mentioned, this episode is brought to you by our good friends over at FanDuel, of course. We've been talking about them all week, all month, actually, I guess. And we're really excited about the new sports betting partner for Locked On because it's the number one sports book. It's FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, that's even better. They have so many great features that make betting on sports fun and easy. New customers, listen up. If you're a new customer, this is the moment. Join today and get started with $150 in free bets, guaranteed. $150 in free bets, guaranteed. When you place your first $5 bet, sounds immense. What do you have to do? Easy. Sign up at fanduel.com/lockedon. They got all your favorite bets from money line, point spreads, player props, you name it, they have it. So football fans, don't miss out. Super Bowl is coming, of course. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at fanduel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. absolutely nailed that ad, by the way. That was, I did one yesterday, and I fully, for those that listened yesterday, they know I pretty much butchered and botched it. And it happens, right? This is live TV happening. And sometimes things go
Mate,
wrong.
I was proud of you.
Absolutely. All right. I may not be feeling as affectionate towards you and after the next maybe 2 or 3 minute segment. But the question is, Matt Barnes was DFA'd by the Red Sox. They decided that they'd saw what led to that decision for the Red Sox here.
Well, Matt Barnes is a long and winding road for the Red Sox. So, did you know that Matt Barnes was the number 1 draft pick for the Red Sox? He's not the number 1 overall draft pick, so the number 19, but the Red Sox first round draft pick in the same round that they drafted Mookie Betts, Jackie Bradley Jr., and Travis Shaw, all of whom had, and then several other major leaguers. It's a legendary Red Sox draft. So he was a guy who was drafted out of college. He went to UConn and had really high upside, very good pitcher there, really solid pick at that back end of that draft, who did pretty well. But when he came through the higher end of the system, it was clear he was going to be a reliever. He still has to a point, a plus curveball and a good fastball that he can work off. And when he came into the team in sort of mid 2000s, he was really solid and not quite elite, but a really good reliever, like a really strong back end to middle reliever. The curveball, just absolutely brilliant pitch,
Insane.
Like really, really great to watch. Like put everyone away. That sort of Kimbrel style knuckle curveball that when it's on song, anyone can pitch anything off it. And then it kind of, and he was a big part of the 2018 World Series as well. When Kimbrel was completely gassed, he was taking a lot of the big spots alongside Joe Kelly. So like a guy who the Red Sox fans dreamed on him. He maybe wasn't quite what everyone hoped for, but still a really good contributor. Even when he was like a really solid and like almost elite level reliever, he was always a bit of a scary watch, right? In the way that someone like Kimbrel was, where you just weren't quite sure if he was going to have it that day, whether he was going to find his spots, whether he was going to leave put a lot of guys on base and then work around it. Put 3 guys on base and then strike the next 3 guys out. And that's why he was a reliever rather than a starter, frankly, because he just didn't have the control that he needed to be a starter. But then 2021 is kind of where the worm turned for Barnes. So he came into the season as the closer, and he was the best reliever in baseball for the first half of the 2021 season, right? And then he just wasn't. And no one's quite sure why. And like he got this big contract extension, which is, it was due $9 million this year that, we're kicking in some towards the Marlins. He just stopped being good. And he didn't go from being like elite to like fine. He went from elite to completely unpitchable. It was like, has he got the yips? Is it sticky stuff? Has he been overworked? Is it a combination of all 3? I think the truth is probably was a combination of all 3. And then last year, he just hadn't. The first half of last year, he was terrible to the point where he was actually he was sent down. Like he was sent to Worcester. This is a guy who won a World Series. No one had remembered that he still had an option. He was sent to AAA and then brought back. And when he came back from AAA, he was quite good. But if you look at his peripherals, I saw you sharing this. His splits for the first and second half of the season are pretty extraordinary in terms of the top line pitching metrics, so ERA, FIP, and so on. But if you look at the peripherals, they're basically the same, right? The story of Matt Barnes last year between Matt Barnes of the back end of 2021 and Matt Barnes of the front half of 2022 and the guy who we had from like June, July last year is he just stopped giving up home runs. Right. If you look at the rest of his metrics, his strikeout rate was down. His walk rate was marginally up around the same. He was leaving fewer guys on base than he had been, but that was because he wasn't giving up as many home runs, which, you could say that was because of a correction, but it just looks like an outlier, frankly. So I don't know. He just hasn't got the crispness in his delivery back since he had that issue where he kind of fell away. He had some back problems. So whether it is sticky stuff, whether it is, mental, it's unclear. But he definitely looked like a pitcher that was kind of done.
Really?
The middle of last year. And when he was DFA'd, yes, he was better in the back half of last season. But once you start digging under the surface, as you did yesterday, it's not like the first look at the stat line and go, "Oh, that's quite good." Second look, you go, "I can understand this." Yeah, he's a guy who I've been a bit unfair on in the past. I've always sort of loved to hate him.
Okay.
But you're always a little bit more nostalgic and fond in hindsight for guys. So yeah, I wish him well. If he can get back to 3/4 of the level that he's capable of, you'll have a really solid guy who can pitch in the 7th and 8th inning for you for sure.
Yeah. I think as I look at this, I think that's the most likely role that Marlins are hoping that he can play is a kind of 7th inning, maybe 8th inning guy. I think Dylan Floro is likely to still be the closer, let's say. But one of the things from the Marlins side right now, this is the uncertain bit, is Don Mattingly isn't here anymore, and Skip Schumacher may well take a very different approach to the bullpen and closing out games to Don Mattingly. And so who knows whether there is a closer, whether it's closer by committee, etc. And so I think there's a decent chance that Matt Barnes will see some leverage spots because fundamentally there's not a ton of guys in the pen right now from a Marlins perspective that have that experience. And that's one thing that Matt Barnes has is experience. But to your point though, John, could he be cooked? Could he be just fully cooked here and actually he could be done?
Quite possibly. I mean, look, what you got to ask yourself as a Marlins fan here is if that guy's a major league level closer, and he has been, like if he still is, why have the Red Sox signed a 34-year-old Kenley Jansen and a 35-year-old Chris Martin and then DFA'd this guy?
Yeah, it's a good question.
There's definitely something you can do, right? You can look at it different, change of scenery, a bit like Benintendi, right? Everyone in Boston said Benintendi's completely finished. He's going to go to the Royals. He's not going to. He's going to be a fine major league player. He's not going to have the career that anyone thought he was going to have. And first year it looked right. The following year he was brilliant, and then he was brilliant on the Yankees last year, and he's earned $75 million from the Chicago White Sox. He could be that guy. Like that is not a sort of 95th percentile outcome. That there's a decent chance, but there's also a decent chance he's just like he's the first guy that you guys DFA this season.
Yeah, it is possible for sure. I think going back to where we started here with this trade, in reality, it feels like it serves both needs for both clubs, and I think the upside play is higher for the Fish, which makes sense, but I think the risk factor equally is as high. I think Bleier is, as we've all discussed, he is who he is. Lefty guy, ground baller, seeking contact and weak contact, and he's just one of them guys. It's fair to say, one of the most humorous moments, and I hope you've seen this. If you haven't, please do go and find it. Was that situation where he had 3 balks in an inning last year?
I did see that.
He balked him around from first to score a run, which was absolutely hysterical. And they were the first balks of Bleier's career. So that was just a very funny moment, I would say, with Bleier, and I'll look back on that very fondly. He's a great clubhouse guy.
I've heard that. Yeah,
he is. He's a top guy. Nice sense of humor. Different type of sense of humor as well, which is fun. So I think this feels like a win-win right now. I think if the Marlins can get a 7th, 8th inning roll out of this guy for the whole year, I think that'll be fine. And I think the Bleier, and they've got an option as well. They've got a relatively cheap option at the back end. The Red Sox there at $3.5-4 million if they decide to exercise it. I can't see the Marlins likely, unless Barnes turns into an elite closer again, looking to exercise his option. That feels a bit too steep. That feels like a Red Sox option rather than a Marlins option, to be honest. Okay. I think that's probably covered the ground there. Let's have some quick fire bits here right at the back end of this episode, mate. You're a British baseball fan, as am I. You're a Red Sox fan. But we're both Team GB heading into the WBC. Fair to say there was some disappointing news coming out. It's not been confirmed, but reported that likely Jazz Chisholm Jr. will not be participating for Great Britain, as the Marlins have the ability to exercise that option because he was on the injured list for such a long period last year. Disappointing news for us as Great British fans, though, right?
I mean, I think it's disappointing news for us as Great British fans, but I think it's disappointing news for the sport with this
Agreed.
being, the big shop window that they have for global expansion. And he is unquestionably one of the most, I mean, they've chosen him to be on the cover of MLB The Show 23. Like,
Yeah.
they've done that for a reason because he oozes charisma, he oozes style and energy. He's the type of guy who you want to front your sport on the biggest global stage, which, the World Baseball Classic, the World Cup of Baseball purports to be.
Yeah.
Like, I totally understand it from the Marlins point of view.
Mm.
Makes complete sense. Where I came out, I'd be doing exactly the same thing. Like, who's this Drew Spencer bloke? Just, put him on call block. Stop calling me, mate.
Oh,
But
dear.
yeah, it's gutting from a GB point of view. I mean, he would obviously have been by quite some street our best player.
No,
And it's already a bit of a tall order taking on, some bloke called Mike Trout.
Not sure
We'll
I've
be
heard of
fine.
him.
We'll be fine. There's some dudes. Anthony Seymour, his Jazz's Bahamian compatriot, is almost as good as Mike Trout anyway. So
There we go.
in my opinion.
There we go. I mean, it's going to be a fun, nevertheless, taking all of this away, it's going to be extremely fun for us as British fans to watch Great Britain take on the USA in the WBC. I mean, that is a wild situation. I'm sure the British players will be absolutely pumped for that situation. And I'm sure in many ways, the US guys, I'm not sure pump's the right word, but they'll be, perhaps it'll be a home partisan crowd as well for the US crew.
Absolutely. Look, but the squad that they've put together is amazing, right? This is what everyone always wanted the World Baseball Classic to be, right? They wanted a US team that's Clayton Kershaw, Mike Trout, Bryce Harper, Mookie Betts, Paul Goldschmidt, Nolan Arenado, right? That's exactly what it should be.
100%.
I love it. Good on Mark DeRosa for managing to get all of those guys to stand in line behind the flag. It's exactly what this event should be. I just wish that Great Britain were taking on, like, I don't know, Nicaragua.
That would be, I guess so. I must say, the Dominican lineup, though, as well, looks insane. Absolutely. I saw that posted the other day. They're like projected lineup and rotation and whatever. And boy, oh boy, the Dominican is absolutely insane. I think they are actually favorites for the tournament as well. I saw in the recent odds. Great Britain actually were the least favored team by the odds anyway. Shocker, I know, but I mean, if Jazz was on that roster, I think they'd be at least like third favorites probably. For
third favorites, yeah. I mean, look, have these people not heard of Nick Ward and Justin Wiley? They will have soon.
They will have soon.
They're going to be like the Saudi team in the World Cup beating Argentina. You heard it here first.
That actually would be. Final one for you then, mate, before we get out of here. The Red Sox, how are they shaping up heading into 23? There was some, I would say, relatively strong links between the Marlins and Red Sox in terms of doing not this deal, but a different type of deal.
Yeah.
Nothing seemed to come to fruition. But, I think the Red Sox clearly in need at that point of a shortstop. And so Marlins were shopping a few. Miguel Rojas ended up traded. But clearly as well, like the Marlins have a ton of arms. And I think the Red Sox, may or may not need an arm or two as well. So it felt like things were coming together. They didn't, but in general, right now, as we're into February, how are you feeling about this Red Sox team into 23?
A lot better than I was in, late November and early December when as I was saying to you before we started recording, I woke up to the worst text of my life from my fellow founder of Bat Flips and Nerds, Tom Pringle, who's a Padres fan. So to have the Xander Bogaerts news broken to me in trademark, unsubtle fashion by him was pretty awful. And for a while, it sort of snaked here and there, and it just didn't look like they really knew what they were doing. But when it got to the other end and Mondesi's in and Bleier's in, and also it like there is a roster that makes sense now, which for a while it just didn't. So when we did our AL preview a couple of weeks ago, I was like, I just don't know what to do with the Red Sox. I don't know whether you give them a 20 or a 50. I think it's probably closer to a 50 than a 20, but everyone was expecting Bogaerts and Devers to be locked up and then them to supplement around them, which, would have been a 60 or a 70. So it's a weird one. I think, part of it is this like a bit of copium, but part of me does feel like they've addressed some of the holes in the roster. I said about the bullpen earlier. I think the lineup looks more balanced. A lot of it is dependent on how good Masataka Yoshida is. If he's as good as the Red Sox think he is, that's going to be excellent. If he's as good as Kylie McDaniel thinks he is, they've just paid $90 million for a really bad baseball player. So we'll see. In terms of the matchup, Bleier was probably the only Marlins player who wasn't linked to the Red Sox over the course of the season. You had Rojas, Joey Wendell, Edward Cabrera, Pablo Lopez, and I've had all of them. I mean, I'm happy to have a Bleier as well. But yeah, there was a lot of talk. I don't know whether it was both of our fan bases just looking at sort of inertia and trying to think trades into existence between, Edward Cabrera for Tristan Casas, Edward Cabrera for Ceddanne Rafael, and other such things. But it did seem like there was a match. But you guys made your trade of Pablo for Arai, and that made a lot of sense for both parties, and so made more sense for Minnesota to sell high on a rise and you to fill a hole in your lineup for with an area of depth than it did for the Red Sox to be trading away the guy who I think is going to be their anchor first baseman of the next 5 or 6 years in Casas. So it's a weird offseason. The weirdest I think since certainly 2013 as a Red Sox fan, but then they won the World Series in 2013 when they signed Mike Napoli and Shane Victorino and Johnny Gomes and everyone like that. And everyone went, bridge year. No one knows in baseball, mate. That's why we love it.
Exactly. Anything can happen. Why?
By the way, mate,
us?
Who have I not mentioned? Adam Duvall!
Adam Duvall, absolutely, mate.
Another one. There's going to be plenty of those going over the monster, mate. We're going to get the GIF out every single time.
100%. Well, you better get your lawn mowed, mate, because you might be out doing the dive on the lawn on a Sunday after too many tinnies, which can happen. Forgot about that Adam Duvall signing, and I mean, actually, it's a great fit. I'm still perplexed at the way the Marlins decided to just cut bait with Duvall, who went on to win a World Series, and he's done all right, hasn't he? He's done all right, Duvall. He has. He is who he is. But I think the Marlins needed offense, and they decided to cut bait on Duvall. Not sure about that one. There's something is off. But anyway, with that being said, we are way over time, which is we said we were gonna be, mate. Yeah, we said I've given myself 7 minutes overspill, which feels about right. So with that being said, before we get out of here, John, feel free to replug. Give it the full plug on Bat Flips, mate. Let everyone know what it is you guys do, cover, where to find you, etc. Then we'll get out of here. So we bill ourselves as the British take on baseball. There's obviously many other of those available, including Pete. You can find us on Twitter at @batflips_nerds, on Instagram at @batflipsandnerds, and also on Facebook if you want to go and dig around. We're on there somewhere. It's a weekly podcast covering all things MLB and quite a lot of other baseball stuff. It's similar to what Pete does. Irreverent. We've all got stupid accents. You might enjoy it. Have a look. Yeah, absolutely. Accents. There is a lot of accents. There's a lot of regional accents in the Bat Flips and Nerds crew, I would say. So yeah, for people in the States who are listening to this, my accent is effectively the equivalent of what Americans think a Southern accent is. Only in the UK, it's Northern. There you go. There you go. There you go. Guys, thanks for making Locked On Marlins your first listen of the day. It is February now, guys, and things are starting to heat up. It is not long until pitchers and catchers report. But in summary here, the Marlins and Red Sox are both happy with this trade. It feels like win-win right now. It's not often you say that with a big reliever for reliever move, with a DFA and some cash thrown in between. We'll wait and see how it all plays out. As great British fans, we remain optimistic about the WBC. And the Red Sox feel like things have come together nicely as the offseason has gone on, very much like our Miami Marlins. Guys, as you know, if there's news, they'll be Locked On Marlins. Let's hope there's more news tomorrow and they drop another bomb. In the meantime, though, thanks for joining me. We'll see you tomorrow.